Hi everyone, Jay here from JAAD Productions, back with another video. Not a usual video that I'm doing, just something that's a little different. I planned on doing this sooner, but I was a little bit busy. But essentially, this video is a response to a comment I got on the Beginner's Guide to Skaven video that I did. And the comment was, what about all rat swarm armies? So I sat down with my book and I thought about it and I put together a list that I'm going to be showing you today. I personally don't have the models to do this, but this is an example of a list of a Clans Molder themed army whose focus is on rat swarms, and it's at 2,000 points. It's not the most competitive thing, but I am reasonably confident that it will perform very, very well. Of course, things always change on the tabletop, but it's always easy to gauge, you know, how certain things perform, and you build your list, and sometimes it's just got to go play it. Personally, I don't think it's the most competitive thing. I think it should do well, but I know when I was list building, I thought, based on stuff I've seen, there are certain things you can change about it to tighten it up, make it a bit more concise, put in more of the things that are good, and there's a couple of things you can do overall. But I feel like this is a good one. And I took notes of what those changes are, and I'll be discussing them at the end of the video. So we're going to discuss the list, we're going to discuss how it is sort of envisioned to be played, and then we're going to discuss the changes up that I noted that you could do to make this list even better. So, jumping straight into it, we start off with our army. We've got our 2,000 points, so we require a leader and 3 battle line. We've got our gnaw holes, just from our Legion's ability. You're always going to take them. They're free. They're not really going to do a lot in this situation, unfortunately, because your gnaw holes have a... Well, the way I'm envisioning this list is to be run is more along the lines of a giant Death Star that goes up the field and replenishes stuff. Your gnaw holes are really only going to come in play when it comes to the one wizard that I included in this army, and to be honest, transporting your rats around, it can be something you can do if you've got the characters nearby to do it. Otherwise, they're just a little something. They're a backup contingency that you can place in 3 different areas, so that you can play mind games with your opponent to teleport some rats through, or you can get the +1 to cast for easier spells. Now, let's looking at the list now. Our leader, the first one I've included, and our general, is a Grey Seer on Screaming Bell for 240 points. So the Screaming Bell is a fantastic unit. It's a little pricey, but it's very good. It's got the random chart and table, which is going to be very effective, providing you the bonuses there. It is okay in combat. Like, it should never be there, but as a last resort, it can happen. It has happened to me. It's pretty good. It's got Crack's Call, which is a good spell against slow-moving enemies, things like Fire Slayers, things like Stormcast Eternals, Ogres, Orcs, things with low movement. It's got the ability to, if you're really lucky, you can summon a Vermin Lord, so that's a free unit that you're going to get. You can't go wrong with no matter what Vermin Lord you summon. It's a thing. Don't count on summoning a Vermin Lord with it. That's not its real purpose. Its real purpose is mostly there because most of the time you're going to get... most of the time you're going to be putting out mortal wounds. Deafening Peals is great. Avalanche of Energy for more spell casting reliability. With this build, if you put it, you're going to get +2 and +3 if you have it near a gnaw hole. Other than that, that's mostly just its purpose. Provide those fancy mortal wounds and some debuffs and some spells. It's got the advantage of its, you're wholly within 13 for skaventide, which is everything Skaven is going to be immune to battle shock, which is good because battle shock is something that a lot of these units are going to struggle with low bravery, and Skaven tend to struggle with just in general. And it's pushed into battle means you need to have something. Fortunately, we've got some stuff in this list that's just kind of like, you kind of want this moving up with it because of the fancy things we can do with that. And that's why it always tends to end up in combat in my experience, because it needs to be just behind your line. And it needs to move up with your army, but it's there. It's 13 wounds. It's got a 5-up feel no. It's very good. I've made it the general in this list, mostly because I didn't feel the need for the Molder general traits in this particular build. None of them particularly struck me. So I went for that, and being Master Clan, it doesn't break the Allegiance ability, so you can still take Molder Battle Line. Everything else in the list is Molder, so that's fine. So we're still keeping to that theme. Our trait that we took was Master of Magic, which is a +1 to cast and unbind. I put a relic on it, the Skaven Brew. It's a 3 inches. It's a fantastic relic. I absolutely love the Skaven Brew. And now the thing about the Skaven Brew is that it's going to let you do a couple of little fun things. It's, again, 3 inches, so you've got to be close. So it's once again playing into the, the being just behind your lines and the Death Star sort of approach that this list is going for. Focusing on buffing those rat swarms. Because the rat swarms regenerate, you use the brew on them, and they get +1 attack, but they take D3 mortal wounds. So that puts them up to 6 attacks. So you can put a unit of 8, D3 mortal wounds. It's not even going to kill one of the rat bases. So that's a bonus, and you can use that to buff up the rat swarms in particular. The other things in this list that you want to be buffing up are the giant rats and maybe the hell pit. But mostly the rat swarms, since they can take it and they go up to 6 attacks with it, and with your other buffs, they should be hitting pretty well. Then we took the spell Death Frenzy. Death Frenzy is a fantastic one because it's a relatively low casting value. It lets your guys fight, and you're going to... Well, actually, it's not a low casting value. It's casting value of 7, but with +2, you're going to be able to get some stuff here. So, it be able to cast it reliably somewhat if you've got your Screaming Bell with your bonuses going on, or you're near a Gnaw hole. Otherwise, you're going to be +1. It's better than nothing. But Death Frenzy is a really important spell in this list because your rat swarms, they don't have high saves, and they've got a lot of attacks, and they can potentially have... They can hit well, but they can't wound well. So the key here is to get as many attacks as possible. So letting them fight after they die means you're going to get more bang for your buck out of those really fragile units. Then, for our battle line, we've got 2 units of 10 giant rats for 60 points. Now, I know what you're thinking. We need 3 battle line, and that's because our 3rd battle line is another unit of 20 giant rats that is in the good old battalion. So the giant rats are an okay unit in terms of performance. I own some and run some, mostly as just backfield screens for 60 points. The idea being with the giant rats is that they're an okay alternative to clan rats, but cheaper. So the idea is that the 2 units of 10 are used for screening and flanking, making sure no one can sneak up on you, use them to claim objectives and camp on them. The units of 10 aren't going to benefit from their ability, but the unit of 20 is going to have a 3-inch reach. So that's fine, and it's going to have a 2-inch reach until it gets below 10. So you can sort of use them as a front screen, is the idea of this, and then you have the rat swarms behind to go after things. So that unit of 20 goes forward and you buff them up to try and make them immune to morale, so they just are a little wall, that a speed bump that guys have got to smash into before they get to your main force that you want to hit them with, being the rat swarms, the rat ogre, and the hell pit. And that's what they do. Otherwise, there's not a lot to them. Then we've got the battalion, the Flesh Meld Menagerie. For 160 points, it forces you to take a few things. Amongst them are rat ogres, which I would probably leave out of this. The Hell Pit Abomination is an optional choice. I chose to put it in there just as a bit of a distraction card effects. That can also lend some hitting power. It's a bit of a random monster, but we'll get there in a moment. The first thing there is the Master Molder for 100 points. Now, the Master Molder is good in this list. He benefits from the Menagerie specifically, its ability. And so he is, he shouldn't really be attacking, but he's not terrible. He's got his 3-inch whip, which is 3s and 4s, -1, 6 attacks. And his Things Catcher, which is 4 attacks, 4s and 4s, -1, 2 damage. He's not terrible. You could change up the list to be a little less supportive of the rat swarms and a little bit more trying to manipulate him into hitting harder, but I don't think that's particularly worth it. He's not a particularly durable character with only 5 wounds and a 5-up save. His Crack of the Whip is shared by his fellow Packmasters, which we've got 3 of them in a unit, and they're not great, but they're 2 wounds apiece, and they basically serve to the Packmasters and the Master Molder combined both have the Crack the Whip, and it's basically the idea of including them both is not only do you have to, but they give a larger, essentially, aura of giving +1 to hit for your Clan's Molder packs, which is good, because your Clan's Molder packs, they include the Rat Swarm, most importantly, and technically the Giant Rats, and the Rat Ogres as well. And it's a 12-inch aura, wholly within. And as well as that, it also doubles the bravery of Clan's Molder units wholly within 12 inches as well. Again, very important because you have very terrible bravery. Now, that second one will only come into effect if you're too far away from the things like the Screaming Bell, but it will do things such as doubling the Giant Rat's bravery from 3 to 6, the Rat Ogres, their bravery from 5 to 10, and the Rat Swarms from 10 to 20, just as a giant middle finger to anyone who would try to morale bomb them off the field. It's not as good as ignoring Battle Shock, but it's an alternative in case things are just that little bit too far out of the wholly within range. Which means you can also spread your guys out a bit more, and then kill models, so that you can be within that as the combat goes on. In addition, the second thing that we've got going on here with the Master Molder is his command ability. It's your only one in the it's the only one here in this list, and it's the Unleash More Beasts, and you get to pick a Clan's Molder unit that's already been destroyed, so in this case you will want to be using it, and it's pack unit, so you want to be using it on the Rat Swarms primarily, maybe the unit of 20 Giant Rats, and basically you just want to use it to flood the field, because it lets you roll a dice, and on a 5-up, a new identical unit is set up wholly within your territory, within 6 inches of the edge of the battlefield, and 9 from the enemy units. Now, sometimes territories can be quite big, so you can put those on the flanks and have those come in there. It can be the difference between grabbing an objective, and putting it in the Flesh Meld Menagerie lets you get those on a 4+. And being in the Flesh Meld Menagerie, you're also going to get a second command point when you have your first turn, but it means you're going to start with one at least, so you've got those command points to burn. And then the Screaming Bell, the idea is you're only ever going to use the Master Molder for this command ability. And then the Screaming Bell, it's going to use the classic reroll ones to hit command ability and in melee, and combine that with its Master Clan trait of getting CP back on a 5+, so that basically he is trying to buff your units, and then when they die, the Master Molder is trying to call them back. So that is a thing that you can do. Now, it is important that you've made it by going with Flesh Meld Menagerie. You don't have to do it with the Flesh Meld Menagerie. There's a relic that you could do that you can put on the Master Molder that'll make it a 4+. Now, there is a little caveat here about the Flesh Meld Menagerie's version, is that you can only use it on things in the Flesh Meld Menagerie. So in this case, you can only use it on the rat swarms that we put in there, the giant unit of 20 rats, and the 2 rat ogres. So that is a thing, but those are the ones you want to be using on, and if you're going to be risking a command point on a 50-50 roll, you're going to want the 240 point rat swarm back that died, because they've got 5 attacks each and 4 wounds. So that is that. Other than that, he's mostly just there. In here, I did give him the relic, the Rabbit Crown, because we've got the battalion, we can take another relic. The Rabbit Crown is basically it's the only real buffing one for Molder, and it's just an obvious standout take, especially with any kind of Molder list, I really think, because really, while you want your Master Molder to live, you could take multiple of them, but the ability that it gives to buff stuff is, in my opinion, just that preferable, building towards that Death Star build. And it provides a aura, and it's a 13-inch aura of re-rolling wound rolls. So that's all wound rolls to Clan's Molder pack units within 13 inches. So that means your slightly hard-hitting rat ogres are going to hit better. So, they wound on 3s, which is nice. So, letting them re-roll that is pretty good. But more importantly, the giant rats wounding on 5s. You've got ways of buffing them to be 3s to hit, 5s to wound, re-rolling everything now with decent reach. And then you've got the rat swarms, which are good. You can put them up to 4s to hit. You can give them re-rolling ones with a command point. You can give them 6 attacks, and then you can give them re-rolling all wounds, wounding on 5s. And then you can let them fight again with Death Frenzy when they're killed. So that's the whole janky premise of this list. That's the whole looping pattern that you want to be doing. But it's Age of Sigmar, so we've included some other things that can go around and catch those objectives and be there. And the Master Molder is kind of a key to that, and same with the Grey Seer. So you definitely want to be protecting them. Fortunately, Skaven Allegiance abilities mean they are easier to protect. You're just going to have to be really careful with positioning, as always, with Age of Sigmar. And so then we go into the rest of the battalion. Of course, you have the Packmasters, as I mentioned. You have the Hell Pit Abomination. Now, the Hell Pit Abomination is a 12 wound distraction Khan effects. It hits really hard, but its random movement means it's going to struggle. It's going to struggle to get up there on a bad roll, so it's pretty much always going to be running until the turn you want it to charge, because you'll want it to be moving that 3d6 just to make up for it. It can be one of those things. It can either steamroll ahead of your army, or it can be left behind. The idea is that You can use this thing to play mind games. It's a backup unit. It can be buffed. It's one of 2 units in this list that can be buffed by the Molder trait, the Prized Creations, where you can let it hit a little harder and give it some extra wounds, which is all nice and good. On top of that, it regenerates. It has a minus aura. It's got the 4-up to ignore spells when it's targeted, and, you know, it can potentially come back alive like a phoenix with d6 wounds, or it can just explode into a horde of rats. It's kind of fluffy. It provides a, oh my god, look at that, that's a big monster, I have to kill it, and not the rat swarms element. And if it does reach combat, it can act like a Terrorgeist and really beat the crap out of things, and to be honest, that's what you need sometimes. Of course, I wouldn't say it's anywhere near on the level of a Terrorgeist in terms of sheer stupidity of amount it can kill, but the point is, it is nonetheless a nice big behemoth that you can throw into things and use it as a counter behemoth if you can get its positioning right. But it's a really random element that's mostly just there to soak hits and distract your opponent from the rat swarms, of which we've also got the 20 units of giant rats, as mentioned, and then we've got 3 units of 8 rat swarms each, so a little bit of math for wounds count on those rat swarms. You've got 8 units of, well, you've got 8 bases of rat swarms, which are all nice and tasty with their 4 wounds each, so you're looking at 32 wounds per unit of rat swarms to carve through. They have no save, so they will carve through them. But here's the thing, they shouldn't carve through them too quickly unless you're throwing them into things like Hearthguard Berserkers or other really high damage, high attack output units. Really, really cleavy units. Fortunately, they're on relatively big bases, which means that units that rely on getting multiple things in range to get lots of attacks, such as things like Stormcast Eternal's Decimators, are not going to get the advantages of these. However, running them in such big bases also means that you have to be very conscious of you need to get good charge moves, because they've only got a 1-inch reach, so it's a bit dangerous. You can't run them in rows of 2 due to their base size, so you have to surround things to get the most out of those attacks, which is again why part of Death Frenzy is really important with running such high units. Something you could do, it's sort of, yeah, we'll discuss that in a moment, but that's the crux of the list. The final thing in there is basically a mandatory endless spell, which is the Warp Lightning Vortex. You're running a wizard, so you want one of these as Skaven. You're running the Warp Lightning Vortex, you want to plop it down in an area or on top of some enemy units and say, I want everything in that area to die because the rest of my army can't deal with it, or I want you to not walk through that area without getting things painful to give me more time to position my units. It's a really good control spell. It does a lot of damage. It's 100 points, but it's worth it damn near all the time, so long as you can get it off, which is why getting the buffs to the Screaming Bell to cast is important, because you paid 100 points for that. You don't want it going away for too long. You kind of always want that on the field, so yeah, it's always going to be that plus Death Frenzy that you want to be casting, essentially. Crack's Call is a nice little fallback. Mystic Shield, it's not really worth it on anything in this army. You don't have saves to be worth rerolling ones. Doesn't increase the performance percentage chance. So, couple of alternate things you could do. And this is the last section of the video. So, some alternate things you could do is you could remove the Screaming Bell and you could replace it with just a Gracier on foot with the Snout Grovel Robes, or you could keep the Skaven Brew. You could add in, removing that, you could add in another Master Molder. just for more chances of essentially trying to get units back, but only on a 5+. It will eat into your CP, so that's just something to be aware of, and why I didn't commit to it here, but it's redundancy nonetheless, and it's still that +1 to hit buff, and the doubling the bravery. You could drop the Hell Pit Abomination and invest in more rat swarms, but that would mean, well, actually, you can do that and still keep the battalion, actually, because the Hell Pit Abomination is optional in the battalion. It's 240 points. For its price, you can get another unit of 8 rat swarms, so you can have 4 units of 8 rat swarms. That's definitely one worth considering if you want to go even more with the rat swarms, and just really commit to that. You could definitely do a couple of things where you could, if you want, you could increase the giant rat sizes and focus more on the giant rats. I don't really recommend that. The giant rats are okay, but they're not the key to this list, and the theme of the list, as per the comment on the video, was rat swarms. And now, I assume that commenter meant rat swarms the unit. And not rat swarms in general, because the entire army is one giant rat swarm. For, like, all Skaven. The rat ogres are not really fantastic. They're kind of 100 points tax to get the menagerie. As such, I wouldn't really... Like I said, you could drop the menagerie altogether, but then you're losing a CP and an extra relic. And then you'd have to go with the ability that lets your Master Molder get the 4+ to bring something back that way. However, that is sacrificing potentially the Rabid Crown, which is such a force multiplier, especially for your rat swarms and giant rats, and even just for the Hell Pit and the rat ogres, which actually doesn't affect the Hell Pit anyway, which is why you want to be using the prize creations on it. It's such a force multiplier for them because they don't wound really well. You could, of course, drop the Warp Lightning Vortex, funnily enough, and you could replace it with some other stuff. You could drop Wizards entirely from this list and focus more on Master Molders and distributing that +1 to hit a bit more and the double bravery. I don't really recommend it. The Grey Seer is just a really good wizard with a really good spell lore. You can make it the general in any themed army of Skaven, and you don't lose your battle line options, because that's a tricky thing, as discussed in my video on the Getting with the Beginner's Guide to Skaven, is that they have a really confusing and restrictive battle line system that requires you to have everything be from one clan and share one clan keyword. The exception is if you have a master clan. Yeah, who is your general. So that's something. It's an option to consider. You can also, if you want to stick more to the rat horde theme, you could drop the endless spell Warp Lightning Vortex. I don't recommend that. But for its price, you could get the Vermintide one, which is more rats. It's a little interesting, wall blocking, mortal wounds dealing. It's not fantastic, but you could do it. The Bell of Doom, also something you could pop up. It's very unreliable. If you happen to get unlucky, it can explode, but it gives the same effect for cheaper that a Screaming Bell would give you. So instead of a Screaming Bell, you could just take a Grey Seer and cast one of these. I think the points on that actually end up being relatively the same, because you're... Let's see, you've got your Grey Seer, who you're looking at 120 points, and then on top of that, to afford the Bell of Doom is another 40 points. You're 160 points. You're saving, let's see. You are saving 80 points by doing that, and with those 80 points, you could buy the Vermintide. You could just take a Screaming Bell instead. you could just take the Screaming Bell instead, and now you have something that can contribute a lot more than a single Grey Seer and is a lot more durable and a lot harder hitting. So that is that. And that is basically the Rat Swarm themed Molder Skaven list. I enjoy building lists. I had a lot of fun building this. I don't have the models to run this, funnily enough, but to really test it out and give you guys a pace on that. Nor can I go out and play it anyway because I'm in permanent quarantine due to viruses and pre-existing medical conditions. So that's, you know, if you are able to play this, you're doing well in your country. I hope everyone's doing well. You can go out and play this, buy this. In terms of price, I don't know how much this list would cost. I know there's a fair amount of old metal models there. I'm not even sure you can get the Rat Swarms anymore. I think you can. I'm not going to bother pricing this list up. Actually, no. I will price the list up. I'll put it in the comments below how much this entire list would cost to buy from Games Workshop. Just as a little extra tidbit. I'll edit it into the video as well, right here. And I'll leave you with that. If you liked this video, leave a thumbs up. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the list in the comments. I love discussing lists. Also, if you want me to build a themed list and see what other things I can come up with, if you're new to Age of Sigmar and you want some examples of some lists like this that are themed around something from a book, let me know. Coming out soon, I have a beginner's guide to Age of Sigmar for Caradrons, who I have now put together my newest army. They've all come in the mail, and I built them. That was a lot of fun. Auric War Clans and Seraphon. Once my Seraphon book finally gets delivered, it keeps getting delayed. And I have my existing Seraphon army, but, you know, I need the new book. So, I'll let you all go now. Thanks for listening. I have been Jay from JAAD Productions. See you all next time, and take care.